Podlayer fans. This is Xai'nyy Coach, and I'm here to answer your questions. We get questions from our fans. They're a loyal following, and they ask really good, high-level questions, and so we're going to have episodes dedicated to just answering those. Right now, all of them will be answered in the theory area, the Podlayer planet area, but we're having other shows coming out that'll have specialties, and they'll have Q&A episodes as well. So look forward to that. Yes, that does happen. That is part of bonding. Humor is a kind of bonding, and one of the fastest ways to really kind of connect the person is to share a sense of humor. And each of the pod powers have a sense of humor that is related to it. So when you're around another person and they are demonstrating using that power in an interesting, clever way, they're having fun with their power. If that's a power that you also are inclined to use a lot, then you're like, ooh, I want to get into that fun. I want to play with my power in that way. But what the different 8 powers consider to be fun, the other powers don't necessarily consider to be fun, particularly, for example, modulation relationships. So what my Xai'nyy considers fun and my V considers fun aren't necessarily the same thing, although the juxtaposition between the two can be humor in itself. Well, it's not necessarily whether it's directive or adaptive. It's a question of what the humor necessarily is concerned about more than anything else. Directive powers do tend to keep score in a way because they actually have agendas they want to be moving forward, and they see other humans that aren't moving those agendas forward or not in the way they think they should be, and that can become something that you could ridicule or have fun with. Eve yourself are not doing it right. Or if you have a great day in a way that seems maybe not great to another mojo, the fact that it seems great to your agenda, that's funny, the difference between that and others. However, the adaptive powers also can have this sort of us against them or humor from that perspective. For example, Xai'nyy, which both Demas and I have, enjoys dismantling stuff. It's an adaptive power, but it's fun to actually have stuff thrown at you that's supposed to be like, I don't know, impressive or good or strong, and you're like, really?
Yeah.
We'll see.
You know, like, since Xai'nyy is just about, like, making discernments, so, like, it'll have something thrown at us and then make the discernment, but then hold on to it later on and be like, can you believe I had to do this? And I actually had to point this out to another creature.
And if you have Xai'nyy, that's funny. You're like, you can imagine, because your Xai'nyy kind of like gets into like their Xai'nyy skin of like, what it'd be like to have something that illogical put in front of you as if that would pass muster.
Yeah.
For real? Really? We love that line. Really? Mm-hmm. Really? So that's adaptive, but it is logical, and so the logic can seem cutting, as opposed to other humor can be uplifting. So humor can also be uplifting, but there tends to be a strong correlation in humor with juxtapositions. So ironically, humor goes very well with modulation. You often need to use 2 powers and kind of compare and contrast them, because the differences between modulation, for example, in our analogy, Xai'nyy, when people bring us illogical stuff, we Xai'nyy it, and that's funny. So that's Xi. That's Xi coming to Xai'nyy, and kind of like the dialogue those 2 powers have. That's funny because modulation makes for strange bedfellows, and that's just hilarious.
And a lot of humor is also the juxtaposition of the interpretive perceptions with the literal perceptions. So you can do this with perceptions too. You know, like playing with the double meaning of something that's figurative or literal, like, hey, that's a horse of a different color, or something like that.
Yeah, or like Xai'nyy with V, like you're doing some big, elaborate, like, ritual in your head, you know what I mean? And then some V thing, like you stubbing your toe, brings you right back down to earth, and that's funny.
Yeah. And
vice versa. Like you're doing something simple, but you realize, no, I'm not. I'm making, crop dusting circles. I'm sorry. Maybe that's not your sense of humor, but it's mine. That is a very good question, and it's complex to answer that because it is both happening instantaneously and over your entire lifetime. So for example, I have Xai'nyy and V. So for me, if I am perhaps doing something like cutting something up for dinner, I'm cutting up garlic. While I'm doing that, I can be using my Xai'nyy of my overall plan for the evening, the theme, what am I going for, that'll affect what I'm cooking and how I cook it. But then also there is the entire worldview I have, which has taken my entire lifetime. I can actually channel my worldview into that V action, and vice versa. My worldview can be affected by the V of the moment in milliseconds, bullet time even. Now, something to consider what you're talking about is there's two times. For example, in tennis, there's two very important times. There's the time of moving to get the ball and hit it. That's one speed, and it's very important to the sport. But there's another speed that's important, which is when your opponent hits the ball over the net at you, how quickly do you recognize from the ball leaving the racket where it's going? There's that speed, and then there's the moving to doing something about its speed. So for example, right now as an Xai'nyy, I'm in contact with my Vi all the time, instantaneously. It is never separate. However, I don't actually have a direct connection as far as like translation. It's sort of like the Vi is held for me by my unconscious powers. So I need to touch it, talk to it, call to it. If, for example, the Vi of my psyche wants to present itself to me, it can be instantaneous, where it just pops right into my head. In fact, I cannot want it to come to me, and it can force itself instantaneously if it needs to be. However, perhaps the Vi that I need, when I try to go get that, can be a bit of a process to locate the correct path to get to it. So that lag time, because it's located in a place that's foreign to you, that's important. It's not so much like a mechanical, like Xai'nyy is super far away from it, like geographically. Because the way the brain works, it's just lightning fast from any region. So that speed's not really the issue. The issue is foreignness. So I'm getting Vi messages all the time right now, but they're foreign to me. So I have to register that they're happening, and then I have to translate them. So it has a lot to do with my skill and my connection to that part of me. So a lot of people don't have a very good connection to their unconscious, and therefore it can take a while to feel around for it. Feeling around takes a lot of time. A lot of time. You can feel around for something that's right there for decades. I've done that. So it's not very far. I didn't have to walk down like many cellar layers, many sets of staircases to get to it. But I rummaged around in a room that was actually quite small, but I could not find the object I was looking for. And that can take as long as it takes. So I hope that helped a little bit. Well, the way it works, I guess maybe you can think of yourself like an RPG character, and you have different abilities, different energy points. So you have what you would call like a daily allotment of energy points that you can spend on whatever you want. So you get that just from being alive, like a baseline. But different things cost different stuff. So if you were to go to, if you're an Xai'nyy and you went off to your offside Xai'nyy right out of the gate, that's very expensive. And so this would kind of come immediately out of that energy bank account. If you go with Xai'nyy, because the source power, it costs a little bit of energy to turn that power on, but then you get a return on your investment, which increases your daily allotment. For example, when Mojos typically do their peak pathway, they often have more energy at the end of hours of doing it than when they started. So if you want to learn how to use your Xai'nyy most appropriately as a Xai'nyy, and this would be for any mojo who wants to work a power that is lower down their hierarchy, is you want to find the Xai'nyy through the peak pathway. So for example, if as an Xai'nyy I want to learn a lot about people, or I want to express myself in the best possible way. As I keep stretching to do that better and better, my Xai will come in naturally. It'll be a prerequisite in order for me to do that better. I don't really have to go out of my way to do that. That's ideal. What happens a lot is the environment may say, I need this amount of Xai done from you by the end of the weekend, right? Maybe some sort of like Zez kind of requirement. In which case, now the question is how to get to that. The best way of thinking of it is sort of like an exercise that's not your favorite, but you need to do a lot of work at. You'll need to work it as you can, and then take breaks to do other activities to keep your overall health going, and then you can come back to exercise and keep working it as it recharges. But working on any power continuously will eventually fatigue it, and the modulation powers fatigue much easier than the momentum powers. So in that daily allotment of energy, if you go to any modulation powers, it'll immediately shrink your daily allotment of energy. If you go to momentum, you can swell it up so that you can swell and then use that swelling energy to do modulation. And while you're doing it, you're still increasing your energy and flexing. And that is the ideal way to do it. Yes, the different pot powers do affect what happens in the body. For example, Xai'nyy is a very active mental power, and when it gets going, it can cause the body temperature to rev up even though you're not physically moving. It's that the processor, the CPU of the human here is activating to a great degree, and that causes heat. There are other powers that can cause heat. Xi can cause heat. V can cause heat because it actually is very kinetic. So it's not just one power can do that. So you have to kind of take the totality to figure these things out. But there is a correlation. For example, Xai and some other powers also have correlations as well.
Yeah, so Xai and Xai, for example, being powers that are more sedate because of the nature of them. So there can be a drop in body temperature because you're more still. It's more you're at equilibrium. So all the different powers would have ramifications as far as the body temperature and physiology, and you have to, like Coach said, just take it all in totality and kind of figure it out that way.
And there's variations, for example, like she said, the Xai and the Xai, they're both more sedate, but then the Xai will be more affected than Xai by, say, environmental factors, because it's designed as a power to note impingement in that way, where Xai, hence the inflammability, is designed to ignore such things. So there's like your baseline temperature, and I agree, the subjective receivers will probably have a cooler baseline temperature. But then there's being affected by, for example, the room, being chilly in a room, being affected by the chilliness in the room. I think Xai, you mentioned, is affected by room temperature and things like that.
Yeah. I think we've talked about it before, where the Xai is affected by like cold in the room or like heat outside, but it can register cold maybe as an impingement. It'd be interesting what the biological causes.
Yeah, we'll need to have temples with lots of human samples willing to be experiments as samples for science. But yes, I definitely think there's something to that.
There's something to it.
Exciting.
Well, I think there's definitely something to that, because the way that Xai works, it's a power that is meant to detect impingements from the environment, even from within. And so just by the nature of it, I think the Xai can be correlated to the canary in the coal mine. You're meant to be that, that sensitive system is just made that way so it can be an early warning system, detector for the rest of the collective or the other powers. So that's one of the things that Xai is meant to do. And so, with the period thing, you think of it as an impingement. It's coming from within the body of the girls that you're talking about, but it nevertheless is a system type of impingement, the system of their body. And so it could be registered by the psyche that way, by the Xai'nyy that way, and they would become then, just by the nature of how the Xai'nyy works, they would become innervated at the detection of something that is throwing them off their normal harmony. And that can be with other things like from the outer environments. I think we talk about Xai'nyy mojos seem to be, we've correlated that they seem to be affected by the seasonal affective disorder, the SAD disorder, more than maybe some other mojos, because of, again, that impingement factor of the outer environment is changing and impinging them in a way, their systems, and so yeah, there's definitely something to that. Short answer. So there are actually a couple of concepts within these questions, which are, one is the flex factor, and the flex factor refers to the inherent nature of the values-based powers, which is, there's an up and down quality to the Xi and the Xai'nyy. So it's based on moods in different ways, but both of them share that, and so that's what we refer to as the flex factor. What the second part of the question talks about relationships between lead discerners and lead perceivers and how those work, and the nature of them. So I would say that if you're talking about a relationship with a lead discerner and a lead perceiver, there will be sort of a dissonance there, because with lead discerners, the impetus of their relationship is this push and pull between the discernment powers. That's the lead. Whereas with the lead perceivers, it's more of an information exchange back and forth, and that is the lead. The intellectual pursuit versus the push and pull of the lead discerners, and so that can happen with even Zez mojos and Zhez mojos. That push and pull. What have you experienced, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, both of the inspirational powers have a dance, but depending on perception lead or discernment lead, the rituals of those dances are different. So, as you said, with the discernment powers, and there's kind of a push and pull relationship, and they actually have to go through those processes to actually feel like they're working towards something or being validated, while with the lead perceiver, that's not quite as important. So there can be a little dissonance there in feeling like these two people, because since their apparatuses are these different powers, then their whole sense of identity is on two different corridors, and there kind of just needs to be some understanding of where you're actually standing in that sense.
Yeah. Understanding knowing lead perceivers versus lead discerners and how those relationships work provides the context to understand what's going on within these. But yeah, that would be the general gist of it, is that there is some dissonance there, and because of the way that lead discerners and lead perceivers interact in dynamics. Well, I think that there will be a stretching of people's powers, because the source power of one will be calling to the tandem power of the other, and so that will be like this challenging or stretching on both sides of the point.
Right. The tandem power, for anyone, it's going to be very influential to the person's psyche. It'll also be energizing in a lot of ways. But the tandem power is the first power that you actually begin fetishing on, because since it is the source, then it isn't the power that actually wants to be turned on the most. So there will actually be a feeling of putting an extra effort to going into the tandem power to meet a source power's needs, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say that for extended collaborations, that they could be successful. I think we've seen those throughout history. I think, though, that there needs to be an injection of other mojos there, like inspirational mojos need to be added to the mix, because I think in because there will be just a creating of more energy with those the inspirationals at all levels, and so I think that it's definitely workable, but you need to actually add the inspirational mojos as part of a group setting. It
is. There also needs to be kind of a balance of, for lack of better words, what you're doing. Because I mean, in this context, an extended collaboration. Well, in an extended collaboration, then there are actually going to be different kind of rituals of activities that you're doing, and pretty much any activity that you're doing is going to either be inherently lead perceiver or inherently lead discerner. And so when you're actually into these, then you're doing a headspace that you're absolutely most comfortable with, like if it's a kind of a lead perceiver kind of activity, or if you're lead discerner. All of these will actually be, or can actually be very, very fulfilling and stimulating in their own way, but they do require getting into a slightly more alien headspace, which you just have to kind of get used to.
As far as peaking, the peaking ritual works with communication with one's other, and the other has the inspirational powers that correlate to the conscious powers and produce the optimum peaking experience. So that would have to be factored in, because that would throw the peaking experience off somewhat.
Yeah, the highest inspiration will actually summon the greatest effort to actually pull out your far side powers and actually get to the modulating, because I mean, there's your apparatus that is doing the pushing, and inspirational powers, which are kind of doing the pull of those out. And so inspirational at the highest relationship is actually going to be the strongest turning on of your momentum power.